Hi everyone, I'm Rona Mackay, the MSP for Strathkelvin and Bearsden. Firstly, I'd like to welcome you all and hope you're all well and bearing up in these very strange days. I'd also like to thank Action Against Stalking for asking me to virtually host this reception to mark 10 years since the horrific crime of stalking was criminalised. As you all know, this event was supposed to have taken place in the Parliament, which is of course impossible just now due to the COVID-19 virus. But well done to Action Against Stalking for coming up with this inspired alternative idea. So normally when I'm hosting a reception, I speak for a few minutes at the outset just to welcome everyone and then introduce the speakers and outline the format for the evening. So now I'm going to speak for a little longer just to give you the background to my involvement with stalking legislation. I don't need to tell you that stalking is a horrible, insidious crime. It has a profound effect on victims both mentally and physically. And it's a vastly underreported offence, but the number of incidences has more than doubled since 2012. The latest figures show that 1 in 4 young women aged between 16 and 24 have been victims, and that's shocking. Last year, I introduced a proposed members' bill to allow the police to apply directly through the civil court for stalking protection orders to protect victims who reported 2 or more incidences of stalking. This meant that the stress of having to do this at a time when they were at their most vulnerable was lifted from them. We know that many victims don't apply for legal protection because of the stress and the financial cost if they don't qualify for legal aid. The only protection available to victims currently is to pursue non-harassment orders through the civil courts, but this rarely happens for the reasons that I've just mentioned. So after much help from our bill team in the Parliament with the drafting, the proposed bill went out to consultation. Police Scotland, women's organisation, as well as individuals who had been or were still victims of stalking were very supportive. However, some caveats were expressed. It was clear that there was an issue of timing around its proposed introduction. Last summer, I met with Gordon McCready and Debbie Forrester, who work on the front line of detection and prevention of stalking and sexual crimes. They advised me that it might be better to wait until the Domestic Abuse Scotland Act, which was introduced last April, had been evaluated with regard to the effect it had on the number of stalking offence prosecutions. Their worry was that there had to be a clear pathway of support and redress for victims, and another layer of legislation might be confusing for legislators, but more importantly for victims. Now, I understood this entirely and decided to pause the proposal of this bill until this evaluation had been done. In reality, due to the pressures of Brexit legislation and now this terrible COVID-19 situation, it would not have been passed in this parliamentary session anyway due to time constraints. However, please be assured that when life returns to normal, and of course if I am re-elected next year, I will progress this proposal in the next session if there's still a gap in legislation to protect victims. If I'm not re-elected, it's perfectly possible for another MSP to pick it up. But I'm keeping my fingers crossed and hoping that I'll be able to do it. So we must stem the tide of this insidious crime and send a clear message to stalkers that they will be stopped and prosecuted before more lives are ruined. And we must send a clear message to victims that they will be protected. So thank you for inviting me, Action Against Stalking, and keep up the good work. You do an amazing job, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the evening. Thank you.
Hello. Can I first and foremost hope that you're all keeping safe and well? That is the most important concern, no doubt, for all of us at a time of real anxiety for everybody right across the country. And of course, you'll understand that the government's focus has been and continues to be on the response to COVID-19. All the other work we're doing really has gone on the back burner for the time being. But I think so important to continue the work we're doing in relation to action against stalking, because we know, of course, the time where we have lockdown measures in place, particularly we know so much of stalking crime can take place in the social media and online space, that actually there could be an increased incidence of stalking in these times. So really important that we continue this work. But I'm really sorry that we can't be together for this celebration and reflection of the 10 years since the offence came into law here in Scotland. But I'm sure after lockdown measures are out the way and when things return back to normal in the recovery phase, I've got no doubt hopefully we'll be able to get back together again. And before I begin any substantive remarks, let me also remind everybody to look at the links below and click on the links below, which should take you to the Action Against Stalking website, but also to some of the other films that are being made. So let's start with a bit of self-reflection. I think a bit of honesty here that perhaps the justice system might not have always taken stalking as seriously as it should have done. 10 years ago, through the Criminal Justice and Licensing Scotland Act 2010, Scotland became the first part of the United Kingdom to introduce a specific law against stalking, with England and Wales then following later on in our nations. That's something we should be really, really proud of. But I'm absolutely clear as a Justice Secretary myself, but of course having talked to my predecessors who were Justice Secretaries previous to me, all of us understand that this is in no small part to the hard work and diligence of Action Against Stalking, and in particular, of course, the Chief Executive, Anne Mould. So let me thank you for the work that you've done, Anne, but also, of course, the organisation has done to advance the issues of stalking and the really detrimental and traumatic impact it's had on its victims. So we should rightly recognise that in the 10 years since the offence. But let's also be honest and say that there's more work to be done. I don't shy away from that as Justice Secretary. We know some of the quite concerning statistics that more than 1 in 10 adults have experienced at least one type of stalking and harassment in 2016-17 and also 2018-19 combined, with the majority of those having experienced an incident, at least one incident, that involves a social media element. And that comes back to my opening remarks, that in these lockdown the lockdown situation we find ourselves in, that actually we could have more incidents, and we could potentially see more incidents of stalking in that social media space where more people are spending time, of course, at home. We know that stalking can have a really detrimental impact on victims, really traumatic impact, and that can be, as I say, exploited by stalkers in terms of harassing online. And certainly that online harassment can also be quite complex as well in terms of resolving those cases. So there's a need for greater understanding across the justice system of how stalking works in practicality, as well as the impacts it can have on victims. And as Justice Secretary, I'm very keen that all the organisations I work with, of course government first and foremost, but also police and others, have that deeper understanding, and working with Action Against Stalking is clearly going to be an important part of that. And the reason why I can have confidence that message is getting through is with my conversations with Police Scotland, including with the Chief Constable, at these times, these difficult times. We're often talking about how we support victims of, be it domestic abuse, but also we know that stalking and victims of stalking may well be fearful at these times as well. In terms of moving forward, well, I was delighted actually to announce in November 2019 for the first time that the Scottish Government will be supporting and funding the work of Action Against Scotland. That work initially enabling Action Against Stalking to develop and deliver training and services to organisations that work with victims of stalking. So again, just increasing the greater understanding of this really nefarious and pernicious crime. I'm also really pleased that we've been able to make further funding available to enable Action Against Stalking to take their very highly successful victim impact box and turn it into a digital online resource. Again, one of the upshots perhaps of the pretty challenging times we find ourselves in is that more and more people are having to adapt to working online and using online resources. So I think this will be hugely welcome, and very much continuing our partnership with Action Against Stalking in the new financial year 2020-2021, providing £70,000. So I hope that demonstrates the government's commitment that we are stepping up to that challenge. Anyone who experiences stalking and harassment deserves to receive the support. And in addition to providing funding, to actually get Scotland, as I have already outlined. We're also supporting the development of the Follow It app by the Scottish Women's Rights Centre, which is designed to help victims, indeed survivors of stalking, to record what's happening to them in a simple and also a safe way. So it's clear that while the Scottish Government, I believe, has moved considerably in recent years in recognising and addressing stalking behaviour, I'm really honest about this. There's more we can do. There's more that we should do, and working with Action Against Stalking and indeed other partners, there is more work I believe we absolutely will do. On the broader context of victims, for me this has been a key issue since taking up the post of Justice Secretary over a year and a half ago. And you'll probably be aware, myself and Lord Advocate chair something called the Victims Task Force. We're acutely aware of the crime of stalking and also the effects, and as I say, the really challenging, pernicious effects it has on its victims. And therefore, for me, the Victims Task Force is there to make sure that the voices of victims and survivors is elevated and prominent right throughout the justice process. From the moment that somebody needs support, right the way through to potentially if there's a court date and trial, right the way through to, for example, if somebody who's been convicted of stalking ends up being released, and making sure that support is there for that individual, for that victim who's been so damaged, so traumatised, so impacted by this terrible crime. So the Lord Advocate and I co-chair that. We've met 5 times since December 2018. It will continue until at least a parliamentary term in 2021, and more that we can do with organisations like Action Against Stalking and indeed other organisations that represent the victims and survivors of stalking. I commit myself very, very much to do that. There's a lot we're also doing to improve the experience of victims as best we possibly can. Later this year, I should say, the Victim Surcharge Fund will open. It'll provide immediate and very practical support to victims in the aftermath of crime, for example, for new locks or indeed alarms. And these kind of things, I think, of a practical nature, will be really, really helpful for, again, victims and survivors of stalking. So once that fund begins to accumulate later on this year, we will make awards of grants to organisations, who will then, of course, open that up to individuals to apply for. In terms of other matters that maybe are not directly related to stalking, but could of course have some impact, delighted with Victim Support Scotland progressing their Families Bereaved by Crime service, an excellent example of where, just having one point of contact that will navigate an individual right the way throughout the justice system and provide support, it could be hugely helpful. And we're thinking, as well as doing that for Families Bereaved of Crime, how can we effectively do that for every victim of crime? Because that's essentially where we want to get to. A lot of work on parole, and how do we ensure that the voices of victims and survivors are heard better throughout that parole service, and doing some work on restorative justice. But again, that element of work will not be suitable for everybody. Of course, will always only be voluntary, and of course you can imagine in matters and in areas of stalking and domestic abuse or sexual offences, of course, restorative justice would not be appropriate in many of these examples. So, whatever we do within the justice system, whatever measures we're bringing forward, we'll always do them in consultation and in a great amount of discussion with organisations like Action Against Stalking. So in conclusion, let me just finish by saying that I acknowledge how difficult this period is for everybody, but really I can imagine extremely challenging, traumatic, worrying, filled and riddled with anxiety for those victims and even potential victims of gender-based violence, including stalking victims. So the government is here to support you. If there's more that we can do, particularly in these challenging times, please, as an appeal to Action Against Stalking and indeed other colleagues, to come forward with any ideas on how we can support you greater and indeed support you better. But I'm delighted we've made progress in these 10 years. I look forward to working with you for at least the next 10 years, if not even longer than that.
Thank you for asking me to be part of this event to mark the National Stalking Awareness Week 2020. Police Scotland is committed to working with our partners across Scotland and in the UK to tackle stalking and harassment and bring perpetrators to justice. It is very important for us to take this opportunity to focus on the impact that this heinous crime has on those affected by it, and for us to do all that we can to help them feel safer and to report. We know that stalking has a huge emotional impact on those it affects. It is a psychological as well as a physical crime. Stalking causes victims fear and distress. It impacts on how they live their lives, how safe they feel, how they act and how they react. It's not the same as domestic abuse, although it can often be a feature of it. Last year, out of the nearly 900 stalking offences recorded by Police Scotland, almost 300 were committed against people who were not in a domestic relationship with the offender. Stalking is an insidious form of abuse, perpetrated in the real world, but also online. In these unprecedented times, with social distancing, self-isolation, and increased reliance on digital devices, the threat of stalking behaviours moving into the cyberspace is heightened. Every stalking situation is unique, but most stalkers demonstrate 4 distinct types of behaviour: fixated behaviour, obsessive behaviour, unwanted behaviour, and repeated behaviour. Stalkers might be fixated on and obsessive about another person, and their behaviours towards them repetitive and unwanted. Stalking is stalking whether it's committed on or offline. Victims can be subjected to unwanted calls, texts or messages. It can include hacking into devices and installing tracking apps, taking control of someone's social media profile, or sharing or threatening to share photos, videos or personal information. 10 years ago, Scotland introduced the Section 39 stalking offence. This was as a result of the hard work and determination of many of the people marking this event. Since then, we've had a very clear message for perpetrators. Stalking is a crime. Subjecting any person to unwanted and repeated attention which causes them fear and alarm is criminal and will not be tolerated. Stalking can affect anyone, so it's important that we all look out for the signs and recognise the damage that the 4 distinct behaviours cause. If you're concerned that you may be a victim of stalking, or that someone you know may be a victim of stalking, then please report to Police Scotland either by calling 101 or using our online reporting form available via our website. Clearly in an emergency, always call 999. Further information or advice is available using the National Stalking Helpline on 0808 802 0300. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Eilish Angelini and I'm the patron of Action Against Stalking UK. It's a charity that was founded 10 years ago to deal with the dreadful problem of stalking, something which can appear insignificant in its behaviours, can amount to something much more sinister and much more serious and criminal over the course of time. Anne Faulds founded this charity. She remains a backbone, and I'm very grateful to her and to Ryan Hatton and to all the others who have supported the tremendous work that the charity does and ensures that it's still here today to provide the guidance, support and help needed by so many men and women across the country. And I'd like to also thank the University of West of Scotland for providing the ability for us to have this virtual celebration, given that coronavirus has put paid to our reception at the Scottish Parliament to be hosted by Rona Mackay MSP. Nonetheless, we are celebrating. We are hopeful that the work that we do will make a difference.